Tonight, breaking news. Former President Trump found liable for sexual abuse and defamation. A New York jury handing down a resounding defeat for Donald Trump after just 3 hours of deliberation, ruling that he sexually abused E. Jean Carroll and then defamed her by labeling her a liar. Carroll awarded $5 million. How Trump is responding to this unprecedented decision tonight and what it could mean for his bid for the White House in 2024. Also breaking, federal lawmakers filing charges against embattled lawmaker George Santos, who's been accused of fabricating portions of his resume. The new details emerging this hour. Also tonight, law enforcement along the border bracing for the next surge. With the COVID-era immigration restrictions set to expire in just 2 days, shelters already pushed past capacity. Migrants sleeping on the streets. We'll have full coverage from both sides of the border tonight. Brink of war. Violence exploding once again in the Middle East. A barrage of Israeli airstrikes killing at least 13 people in Gaza, including members of the Islamic Jihad militant group. Why some in the region fear this violence could spiral into full-blown warfare. Raf Sanchez is in Tel Aviv tonight. Outrage and arrests. Tensions running high in New York City. A Molotov cocktail seen in the crowd. What those demonstrators are calling for as authorities weigh criminal charges for the man responsible. Plus, murder, she wrote. Police alleging a woman poisoned her husband and then wrote a children's story about dealing with grief after he died. The chilling dedication she wrote in the front of that book. And a major update on cancer screenings tonight. Health officials lowering the recommended age to begin breast cancer screenings from 50 to 40. What you need to know about this potentially life-changing and life-saving new guidance. Top story starts right now. Good evening. I'm Jake Ward in for Tom Llamas. We begin Top Story tonight with an unprecedented moment in our nation's history. A jury finding a former president of the United States liable in a civil suit involving accusations of rape, sexual assault, and defamation spanning decades. We want to walk you through exactly what those jurors decided. The 6 men and 3 women of the jury determining that former President Donald Trump did not rape magazine writer E. Jean Carroll, but that he did sexually abuse her in a department store dressing room more than 20 years ago. The jury also finding that by calling Carroll a liar on social media, Trump made false and defamatory statements, and that those statements were made with malice. Carroll awarded $5 million in damages, calling the verdict a, quote, victory for every woman who has suffered because she was not believed. Trump, who did not appear in court to mount a defense, slamming the verdict on social media, once again calling Carroll's story a, quote, hoax. This case, of course, just one of many legal battles Trump is facing. We will have much more on what comes next and what it might mean for his political future in a moment. But first, NBC senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett leads us off tonight.
Can we have a statement, please?
A resounding win for E. Jean Carroll. A federal jury finding former President Trump sexually abused her and then defamed her by calling her story a lie, awarding her $5 million. The jury swiftly returning their unanimous verdict after fewer than 3 hours of deliberations. In a statement tonight, Carroll saying, "This victory is not just for me, but for every woman who has suffered because she was not believed." The jurors hailing from Manhattan, Westchester County, and the Bronx. 6 men and 3 women, including a security guard, physical therapist, and former janitor, all kept anonymous throughout the trial, a rare move imposed by the judge for their own safety. Over the course of 2 weeks, they heard from Carroll, tearful at times, recounting the attack she says happened more than 20 years ago in a dressing room at Bergdorf Goodman. 2 friends she told at the time, along with 2 other women who've accused Mr. Trump of making unwanted advances, all to show a pattern, all claims he's denied. And tonight, another. Moments after the verdict, Mr. Trump released a statement on Truth Social saying, "I have absolutely no idea who this woman is. This verdict is a disgrace, a continuation of the greatest witch hunt of all time." A denial similar to this one from last fall when the former president blasted Carroll's story as a hoax, a post viewed by millions. The one the jury found today was defamatory.
They make up stories, and then I'm not allowed to speak my mind.
But his attorneys put on no defense case at trial, and Mr. Trump never showed up, instead posting about his travels overseas.
I don't know anything about this woman.
Though jurors did hear from Donald Trump watching this deposition video where he didn't shy away from that now infamous Access Hollywood tape.
When you're a star, they let you do it you can do anything, grab them by the you can do anything. That's what you said, correct?
Well, historically, that's true with stars.
It's true with stars that they can grab women by the
Well, that's what it's. If you look over the last million years, I guess that's been largely true. Not always, but largely true. Unfortunately or fortunately.
And you consider yourself to be a star?
I think you can say that, yeah.
Mr. Trump's attorney, Joe Tacopina, telling reporters after court today that tape, a possible ground for the forthcoming appeal.
The Access Hollywood tape should not have come into this case. There were things that happened in this case that were beyond the pale.
In his deposition, Mr. Trump also confused a photo of Carol, who he'd said wasn't his type, for his ex-wife, Marla Maples.
That's Marla, yeah. That's my wife.
Which woman are you pointing to?
A striking moment Tacopina never addressed at trial.
NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett joins us now. Laura, Trump called this a witch hunt, and his lawyer says he'll appeal. You know, the former president obviously has this long history of filing endless appeals in an effort to grind people like E. Jean Carroll down. Do you imagine that that will be his tactic here?
Well, you know, it's interesting. This case actually has a long history. This is not the first time she has actually filed a case against him for defamation. And so it appears she's in it for the long haul. She's accused him of defamatory statements dating back to when he was actually in office. Those got tied up in court, tied up in appeals, as you said, as he tried to fight those. But even if he tries to appeal this one, I imagine she'll stick with it, Jacob.
So maybe closer to the end of this than the beginning of this. That's interesting. And the former president here is, of course, facing a host of other legal issues, including criminal charges and the hush money payments case involving Stormy Daniels. Now, you know, we are used to seeing Trump through this political lens in which the sum total of scandal is what counts. But you are a legal professional, so I'm wondering, you know, legally, is there also a cumulative effect here on prosecutors or juries, or is each case isolated?
In theory, legally, these should all be individual cases taken on their merits, taken on the evidence. However, jurors are human beings, just like everybody else. And so the real question will be, when it comes to those other cases, if those move forward, and we're a long way off from that, he has never been charged in some of those other cases, as you mentioned. If we're getting to that point, though, obviously his defense attorneys will fight tooth and nail to make sure that the jurors in those cases can evaluate the case fairly.
Laura Jarrett with some important context around a historic moment here. Laura, thank you. Now, for more legal analysis, we're joined by legal analyst Angela Senadella. You may know her. I know her from TikTok. The lawyer Angela is her handle. Angela, thank you so much for being here. Now, throughout this trial, a lot has been made of Trump's video deposition from October. There are, of course, two key moments that stand out. We saw them a moment ago in Laura's story, but I want to play them for you again. First, his defense of the Hollywood access tape.
And you say, and again, this has become very famous in this video, I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. Just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything. Grab them by the you can do anything. That's what you said, correct?
Well, historically, that's true with stars.
It's true with stars that they can grab women by the
Well, that's what it's. If you look over the last million years, I guess that's been largely true. Not always, but largely true. Unfortunately or fortunately.
And you consider yourself to be a star?
I think you can say that, yeah.
And then there's the moment, of course, where he confused his wife for E. Jean Carroll. Have a look at that one.
I don't even know who the woman. Let's see. I don't know who. It's Marla.
You're saying Marla's in this photo?
That's Marla, yeah. That's my wife.
Which woman are you pointing to? No.
Here.
Carol.
Oh, is that,
The person
okay.
you just pointed to was
Oh, I
E. Jean
see.
Carroll.
Who is that? Who is this?
Point, your wife. And the woman on the right is your then wife,
I don't know.
Ivana?
This was the picture.
Ivana.
I assume that's John Johnson. Is that
That's Carol.
Because it's very blurry.
So this is my question here, Angela. In your professional experience, why were these the key parts of this trial?
They were both so important, and actually for different reasons. So first of all, the Access Hollywood tape. At some point, this civil trial turned from did Donald Trump do this to could he have been the type of person who did it? And in that case, the Access Hollywood tape was key because it showed that he was saying, well, stars do this. I am a star, and thus it is possible I could have done this. Now, the second thing that we saw here was a little bit different because we saw him there go on about how whether or not this Access Hollywood thing happened, that there was also an issue of whether or not he also made an error there where he said that that Jean Carroll could have been this type of person who made this event happen.
Now, of course, this was a civil case, not a criminal one. For those of us who don't know the law as well as you do, what is the difference here? Is the standard somehow lower, or is it higher to find him liable in this case?
Yes, so the standards are wildly different. And from a civil perspective in this lawsuit, the only potential damages here are financial. And as a result, the burden of proof is relatively low. It's just based on a preponderance of evidence. Do you think he did it, or do you think he didn't do it? Is there a 51% chance he is guilty, or in this case, he is liable, or do you think he didn't do it? The criminal standard is much higher, and the criminal standard is beyond a reasonable doubt. In that case, I actually think Trump probably would not have been found guilty, because here we have a plaintiff who is claiming that she doesn't even know the date of when this happened. So I don't think a criminal trial would have resulted in a guilty verdict.
And from your perspective, I mean, overall, what went wrong for him here? How was it that Ms. Carroll's team was able to meet the standard? I mean, was it the evidence presented, or was it that deposition? Was that just too much for the jury to excuse?
So I think that her lawyers did this brilliant job setting up a progression. So first it started with this witness, the plaintiff, Jean Carroll herself, who really had some credibility issues. I'm not saying she didn't tell the truth, but I'm saying that she didn't know the date this happened. It happened a long time ago, almost 30 years ago. But because there were credibility concerns, what happened next? Well, her team then buttressed and bolstered her with other people. They took a look at two other witnesses who came forth and said they had similar allegations. They also then had her friend testifying that 5 to 7 minutes later, she gave this contemporaneous account of her version of almost precisely the exact train of events. And then beyond that, you say, well, look, jury, if you don't believe her, if you don't believe her friend, and if you don't believe these other two women who also have similar allegations, well, now let's look at the deposition. Let's look at Trump's own words. Could he have done it? Well, the fact that he says stars do this all the time, he doubles down, says stars historically do this, and then he confuses Marla Maples with his wife when his primary defense there had been, look, and frankly, this is not even a recommended defense. I wouldn't. She's not my type. She's not someone I would assault anyway. But when he confuses them, that causes him even more trouble, because then his own defense is obliterated by himself.
Legal analyst Angela Senadella with important context there. Thank you so much, Angela. Now, with former President Trump's legal troubles far from over, the question now turns to what this verdict might mean for his 2024 bid for the White House. NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen and former RNC spokesman Doug Heye are with us now. Doug, let me begin with you. You know, every time President Trump has what the rest of us would consider a career-ending setback for your average politician, it seems to bounce right off him. I mean, he famously said, right, that his supporters would stand by him even if he shot someone in the middle of Manhattan. Now, this is not quite that, but do you imagine they will stick by him now that he is the first former president to be held civilly liable in a sexual assault case?
By and large, yes. The normal rules of political gravity don't seem to apply to Donald Trump. But this also requires action from his potential rivals, whether that's Ron DeSantis, who looks to be running and announcing soon, or those candidates who have announced. They need to take Donald Trump on directly. And if they fail to do so, then he won't pay a political price. And what we don't know ultimately at this point is, even if they do, will that work for those candidates?
Well, John, let's talk about the political price here, the potential for that. I mean, walk us through the political strategies for his Republican opponents. I mean, when does somebody like Ron DeSantis, who by all accounts is close to declaring, when will he decide to attack, do you think?
I mean, to Doug's point, all of these Republican opponents, the potential opponents, have looked at Donald Trump over the course of the last 8 years since he first started running for president in 2015. And have seen none of the scandals touch him. And there's a big fear among those rivals and other Republicans that if they come out and criticize Donald Trump, they will find themselves on the wrong side, not only of the majority of the Republican Party, but that very active Trump base. And I've already spoken to several sources today in the Republican Party around the country who have predicted that at the very least for Trump, this will be neutral in a primary. And some have even said that it will be helpful to him in a primary. Of course, the question of what that would mean in a general election is very different, or at least could be very different.
Well, so, I mean, Doug here, help me understand. I mean, since yesterday, we've been sort of scratching our heads over this Washington Post ABC poll in which 45% of voting age adults said that they would definitely or probably vote for President Trump, even as a majority of them said that he is not trustworthy, and 56% of them said he should face criminal charges for trying to overturn the 2020 election. I mean, so how do we square this? Are there really people out there who somehow simultaneously believe he should face charges but also be president?
Yes, there are. And I think it comes down to what we also saw in that poll is that President Biden's numbers are at historic lows, a 36% approval rating. That's down from 42. 42 was a bad number. 36 is a cataclysmically bad number, and especially his approval or lack thereof on how he's handling the economy. So that's what voters are responding to. And I'd say, you know, on the Republican issue, again, they don't necessarily need to go after Donald Trump. They can put the morality of this issue aside to some extent and say, you know what? Donald Trump has too much chaos around him. He can't focus on doing the job at hand. He couldn't be an effective president, even though we love him so much because of all of this. So there are ways for Republicans to do this without really taking on Trump if they choose to.
John, Doug mentions here, you know, the headwinds facing Biden. I mean, Democrats hit Trump in the past two elections about the sexual assault allegations he was facing. So what do you think the playbook for Democrats is now? I mean, you know, should they somehow just put portions of that video deposition on repeat? What's the strategy here?
You know, there was a theory in the 2016 election, Jacob, that none of these things hurt Trump because they weren't surprising to voters, that basically voters baked into their equation that Donald Trump was somebody who treated women poorly, whether you're talking about the Access Hollywood tape or a variety of other allegations. And so, you know, I think what the Democrats are likely to focus on is surely they will gin up their base or activate their base by talking about some of these scandals. But I think what they're going to have to concentrate on if they want to defeat Donald Trump in the general election is substantive policy issues that aren't about his morality. Because, you know, when the issue has been Donald Trump's morality before, when it's been his character, when it's been whether he, you know, is abiding by the law, he has been victorious.
Jonathan Allen and Doug Heye breaking it down for us tonight. Thank you both. Now to more breaking news tonight. 4 sources confirming to NBC News that New York Congressman George Santos has been criminally charged by the Justice Department. The first-term Republican lawmaker, who has admitted to lying about some of his background, is facing multiple investigations into his finances and accusations of fraud. Despite all of this, he announced a re-election campaign last month. So I want to bring in NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Dilanian, who joins us now from Washington, D.C., and his byline is on this story. Ken, you know, what more do we know about these charges, and when can we expect Santos in court?
Good evening, Jake. We don't know the details of the charges. No documents have been made public yet. They remain under seal. All we're being told is that he has been charged by the Justice Department. We believe it's the U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn, and our reporting is that he's expected in court tomorrow. He'll be processed, arrested, and then make a first appearance in federal court, Jake.
And Ken, as I mentioned earlier, you know, Santos is under multiple investigations. Put the big picture into context for us. I mean, talk to me about all of the different legal and ethical challenges Santos is facing right now.
Right. Most people never heard of Representative George Santos of New York until the New York Times, after he was elected last year, exposed that he had lied about almost every aspect of his resume, including claiming to have graduated from a college that he never attended, worked at places that had never heard of him, including Goldman Sachs in New York. But even after that, new questions began to emerge about how he funded his campaign. He reported loaning himself $700,000, and there were questions about where that money came from. And then it emerged that he had been charged in Brazil with passing a bogus $1,300 check. A former aide came forward and accused him of sexual harassment. And to top it all off, he was even accused of misappropriating funds that were intended to help a homeless veteran pay for life-saving surgery for his dog, Jake.
Ken Dilanian digging into this for us. Ken, thank you so much. We now move to the growing crisis at the southern border, where there is already a massive new influx of migrants, even before a restrictive COVID policy called Title 42 expires this week. Gabe Gutierrez is in Brownsville, Texas, for us tonight.
Tonight, with the border restriction known as Title 42 expiring in about 2 days, authorities say the soaring number of migrants they're bracing for is already arriving, including around El Paso, where more people are now sleeping on the streets. The Department of Homeland Security Monday put out this press release announcing a targeted enforcement operation there today. Now, some, like Marianne Castro from Venezuela, worry they'll be deported. I'm so fearful that after all the sacrifices I made with my 3 kids, I'll have to return, she says. But a Border Patrol union, which blames President Biden's policies for the migrant influx, is slamming the administration for announcing the crackdown ahead of time.
You do not give up to criminals where an operation is going to take place before it happens.
Here in Brownsville, Texas, another city that's declared a state of emergency, migrant aid groups are trying to keep up.
Are the resources stretched thin? Yes, because we don't know what the numbers might look like after May 11th.
The community also still reeling after 8 Venezuelan migrants were killed Sunday when a driver plowed into them. One of the survivors, Gabriel Gallardo, lost a leg. My dreams are broken. They're gone, he says, from his hospital bed. His wife with his 2 children begging for help while she's in Colombia, desperate to make it to the U.S.
Gabe Gutierrez joins us now from Brownsville, Texas. Gabe, what is your sense there? Do local officials, do you think, feel prepared for the end of Title 42?
Well, Jake, local officials for a while now, for many months, have been saying that the federal government was not prepared for the end of Title 42. Behind me, you see agents from the Texas Department of Public Safety. Governor Greg Abbott has sent more state resources, including National Guard members, down here in anticipation of Title 42 lifting. So the state and local officials feel that they are getting prepared. The Biden administration insists that, yes, it is prepared, and for a variety of reasons which we've laid out over the past few days. They've had more processing centers in Guatemala and Colombia. They say that they are working to expand asylum appointments through that app that migrants should log into in their phones that have been complaining about glitches. However, local officials are still worried that the federal government is not doing enough, and there is concern that when Title 42 expires in just over 48 hours, they will not have the resources. But right behind me, you see Texas DPS. The Border Patrol is on the other side of here. They do feel they are upping their capacity here. They just think that these numbers will just be so large that they could overwhelm the system. An unprecedented influx in migration, they think, in the coming days and weeks. Jake.
Unprecedented influx. Gabe Gutierrez for us in Texas. Gabe, thank you. And from Texas, we take you across the border to Mexico, where migrants are packing into shelters as they wait for those pandemic immigration restrictions to be lifted. But limited resources and glitchy technology are leaving people frustrated and desperate for answers. Guad Venegas is in Tijuana and speaking with people there.
Tonight, as the United States prepares for the end of Title 42, Mexican border cities already bearing the brunt of mass migration. In Tijuana, the shelters reaching maximum capacity and bracing for a new influx in the coming days.
There's often not enough food for everyone.
At the Embajadores de Jesus shelter, they say more than 1,700 migrants share what little space is available, even cooking outside.
So she's cooking for 1,500 people.
With hundreds continuing to arrive just 48 hours before the pandemic-era immigration restrictions are lifted. Yet most tell us they feel confused as to what might happen.
So she's heard that the border is going to open when Title 42 is lifted.
It's not quite that simple. U.S. officials insisting asylum seekers take the legal path by using the CBP One app run by the American government, but the technological solution continues to experience glitches. This Venezuelan migrant says he's tried every day for 2 months.
So he's going to select where we're at. Entonces seleccione una fecha, and it's saying, vuelva a consultar ya que se agregue un nuevo día a las 10. So it's saying he needs to come back.
But some getting lucky. Nicole Ramos is an immigration attorney that helps migrants with legal services. She says only 200 are given appointments per day at the San Diego port of entry.
So few appointments using an application that is glitchy and excludes a lot of people from participating who don't have a newer phone, who don't speak a language that is supported by the platform. It results in thousands of people being unable to access the port of entry.
Many too desperate to wait, choosing to cross into the U.S. illegally and then surrender to Border Patrol. hoping it's the final obstacle after a long journey full of risks that have left many bruised and exhausted.
What kind of injuries do you treat here?
Well, from burns to an emergency hypertension, crisis hipertensiva.
So a lot of this stuff is for wounds.
This room is practically for wound care.
Okay. Because you see so much of that.
So much.
Yet the physical and mental toll is expected to continue as they plead their asylum cases to U.S. officials.
Guad Venegas joins us now from Tijuana, Mexico. Guad, you know, for people to have come all that way only to run into software trouble, I mean, what is the U.S. government saying about the app that people are having so much trouble with, and how are the people you've spoken to feeling heading into Thursday when this important regulation changes?
Well, Jake, we did get information from Customs and Border Protection today saying there are changes coming to that app. First off, they're saying they're switching to a new scheduling system that will handle more volume. It would also give 23 hours for individuals to make that appointment. What individuals told me today is that they would have a very short amount of time before the system kicked them out every day. They're also saying that they're going to make changes in a few days that would also add more appointments, and the individuals that made their profiles the earliest would get priority. In a total, it would now be 1,000 appointments per day. Those changes are to come. We'll have to wait and see what it's like when those changes are made and individuals continue using the application. For now, we saw what happened when they tried using the app today. And when it comes to Title 42, a lot of them telling us that it's a bit difficult to understand immigration policy. I think most of us in America would have trouble explaining these changes that are coming, right? So migrants tell me it can be confusing for them to try to understand if things will be easier or more difficult for them to seek asylum after Title 42 is lifted and the new policies are implemented, Jake.
1,000 appointments a day. We'll see if that's anywhere near enough. Guad Venegas for us in Tijuana. Guad, thank you. Turning overseas now to the latest escalation of violence in the Middle East. Israel launching a wave of deadly missile strikes on Gaza, killing at least 13 people, 3 of them senior members of the Palestinian militant group Islamic Jihad. That terror organization now vowing revenge. Raf Sanchez is on the ground for us.
Tonight, the Holy Land's once again on the brink of war, fighting in the occupied West Bank, hours after Israel launched a wave of airstrikes on Gaza, killing at least 13 people. 3 of them were senior figures in the Palestinian Islamic Jihad militant group, responsible, Israel's prime minister says, for firing more than 100 rockets last week.
Those who seek to harm Israel will be harmed. Those who kill our citizens will pay a heavy price.
But the fighters' wives, children, and other civilians also killed in the strike. This is the daughter of a local dentist. Where's my dad, she asks. She doesn't know he was killed in the attack, along with her mom and her brother. Her father's colleagues in mourning.
We feel very, very sorry. We were very sad. This very gentleman, doctor, is a victim of this aggression. We don't expect that. It is very painful to us.
Israel's military says it does everything it can to avoid harming innocents. But the strikes hit residential areas while families were sleeping, making civilian deaths almost inevitable. Islamic Jihad vowing to avenge its fallen leaders. And across southern Israel, communities bracing for their response. Iron Dome missile defense batteries like these have been on high alert all across southern Israel, ready to defend towns and cities from Palestinian retaliation. Israeli authorities closing roads and shutting schools near the border.
Going to school, if it's too dangerous, then kids are going to stay at home.
The question now, whether the more powerful militant group Hamas will throw its full support behind Islamic Jihad. A move that could lead to all-out war.
And Raf Sanchez joins us now from Tel Aviv. Raf, you mentioned right at the end of your piece this question on what Hamas will do next. Have we heard anything from Hamas so far?
Yeah, Jake, Hamas is really keeping everybody guessing. Their political leader has said they will be part of a unified response alongside Islamic Jihad. But what really matters is what their military wing decides to do on the ground. And we just don't have an answer to that yet. Israel, for its part, is really trying to signal to Hamas that if they stay out of the fighting, Israel will not target either their leaders or their facilities inside Gaza. Jake.
And you were down on the Israel-Gaza border earlier today. I know, people who live there have been through so many rounds of fighting like this. What did you hear from people on both sides of that border?
We heard a lot of fatigue. We heard a lot of fatalism. They, as you said, have been through this again and again and again. But we also heard a fear that this time may be more serious. And the reason for that is when Israel strikes in Gaza, usually they are hitting empty buildings. They are deliberately trying to avoid escalation. But this time you have very senior militant leaders killed, and you have all of these civilians dead, too. And so Islamic Jihad, other militant groups, under a lot of pressure to respond in a major way. Jake.
Raf Sanchez in Tel Aviv for us. Raf, thank you. Back here at home, and the high-stakes meeting between President Biden and congressional leaders with just weeks to go before what could be a catastrophic government default. Although no deal was reached, the group called the meeting productive. President Biden spoke moments ago at the White House saying, quote, default is not an option. CNBC's Kayla Tausche has late details.
Tonight, a critical meeting in the Oval Office as America barrels toward a potential June default.
We're going to get started. We're going to solve all the world's problems.
President Biden and top congressional leaders in a standoff over spending. House Republicans recently passing a plan to raise the debt limit if Democrats agree to steep spending cuts. The House Speaker after tonight's meeting.
What are the odds of default now after this meeting, and what happens next?
Well, the House made sure we wouldn't have default because we raised the debt limit.
But now you met with the president.
Well, the Senate hasn't done anything. I've tried to. For 97 days, he has said no. I think the only reason we are actually here today is because we passed something.
But late tonight, President Biden rejecting Republican spending cuts, calling for a debt ceiling increase with no strings attached.
I told congressional leaders that I'm prepared to begin a separate discussion about my budget and the spending priorities, but not under the threat of default. I made it clear that we can cut spending and cut the deficit.
The U.S. has maxed out its nearly $32 trillion credit card, and Congress has just 3 weeks to raise the limit. A default, top economists say, would lead to financial disaster, a stock market dive, tanking 401ks, and a spike in job losses. Missing the deadline by a week would cost 1.5 million jobs, soaring to 8 million if the deadlock reaches the fall. In either case, a recession. And some federal spending could be in jeopardy, including here at All Saints Food Pantry in Detroit, which could lose a third of its annual budget.
There could come a point where we don't have any more food to give.
Divine telling us she relies on this food, her family already struggling with high inflation.
The cost of living went up a lot, so it's hard.
A potential default could also put federal benefits for veterans at risk. We met Shannon Galloway, whose husband Chris served in Iraq and Afghanistan. Since he died 14 years ago, the Galloways have relied on payments from the government.
Those benefits literally are how we pay our mortgage, how we pay our utilities, how we pay daily cost of living.
So what would your message be to the leaders in Washington?
This isn't just politics to us. This is our family. This is our daily life.
CNBC senior White House correspondent Kayla Tausche joins me now from the North Lawn of the White House. Kayla, what comes next now that this meeting has ended and without a breakthrough?
Well, congressional staff will be in touch with the White House as soon as this evening to discuss where they might be able to agree on spending cuts. President Biden invited all four leaders back to the White House to reconvene on Friday, but there is still a lot of work to get done in a very short time frame. Jake?
Kayla Tausche for us at the White House. Kayla, thank you. Tensions boiling over in New York City as protesters demand charges in the chokehold death of Jordan Neely on a crowded subway car. The NYPD arresting nearly a dozen protesters after demonstrators clashed with police. And the White House responding for the first time today, saying in a statement, quote, Jordan Neely's killing was tragic and deeply disturbing. Our hearts go out to his family and loved ones. We firmly believe that the events surrounding his death demand a thorough investigation. NBC News correspondent Valerie Castro has been covering this for us. Valerie, what more can you tell us about these arrests?
Jake, about 150 protesters gathered last night for a vigil outside the subway station where Jordan Neely was choked to death. Police intervened when they say protesters were blocking the entrance to the station. That resulted in some chaos and eventual arrests. At least 11 people were arrested, and the NYPD also released a photo of what they say was a Molotov cocktail found in the area. The department saying violence has no place in civic demonstration, but Jake, it's likely more protests will continue in the coming days.
And I understand we've also learned more about Neely and the struggles he was facing before his death.
So according to multiple sources, Neely was also on a so-called top 50 list of the most at-risk homeless men and women in the city known to outreach workers. And that's based on past interactions and frequency of incidents. He was taken to hospitals several times, both voluntarily and involuntarily, according to sources who say it's unclear if anything more could have been done to better monitor him. Jake?
And Valerie, when do you imagine we could see a decision on whether Daniel Penny, the man who put Neely in that chokehold, will be charged?
The district attorney's office, as well as the NYPD, are both still investigating. Last week, police were calling for any other witnesses on the train who saw what happened or anyone with more cell phone video to come forward. Two sources familiar with the case say the DA will make a decision later this week as to whether to present this to a grand jury for a possible indictment. Daniel Penny, the man who choked Jordan Neely, issued a statement through his attorney on Friday saying, quote, Daniel never intended to harm Mr. Neely and could not have foreseen his untimely death. Today, the pastor for the family of Jordan Neely announced his funeral services will be held in Harlem here in New York on Friday, May 19th, and they've asked Reverend Al Sharpton to deliver the eulogy. Jake?
Valerie Castro for us in New York. Valerie, thank you. Still ahead tonight, an alleged murder plot that is stranger than fiction. A Utah woman writing a children's book about grief following what she called the unexpected death of her husband. Why that widow has now been charged with his murder. Plus, an update on the deadly mass shooting at a Texas outlet mall. What officials have just revealed about why that suspect was expelled from the military. And a critical change to cancer screening guidelines. The new age when public health officials say women should begin getting screened for breast cancer. Stay with us. Top Story is just getting started. Back now with the children's book author facing murder charges for killing her husband. A Utah mother who wrote a book with her children to help them deal with the grief of losing their father, now facing accusations that she poisoned him. Katie Beck reports.
Just a month before Corey Richens was arrested for her husband's murder, she was making headlines in Salt Lake City, Utah on a local morning show for writing a new children's book.
So my husband passed away unexpectedly last year.
The book, Are You With Me?, Richens published with the help of her 3 children after the death of their father, Eric, in March of 2022. It's a guide through grief when a parent dies.
The different emotions and grieving processes that we've experienced last year.
But police have another version of her story, charging Richens for murdering her husband by poisoning him with fentanyl, a medical examiner saying he ingested 5 times the lethal dosage. Police documents report Corey Richens used an acquaintance to get hydrocodone pills weeks before her husband's death and used the same contact to get fentanyl, receiving a batch just 6 days before he died. Richens told police she had made her husband a cocktail and brought it to their bedroom the night he died. She said later that night when she returned, she felt him and he was cold to the touch. Eric Richens' family has released a statement saying they're devastated by the loss and hope justice will be done and are thankful to all of the law enforcement for their efforts in pursuing this matter. Friends of Richens also feeling the loss, speaking about his character.
He had 3 boys that he loved more than anything. He loved to hunt, loved to be outside. Very honest guy, and he was a great friend.
NBC News contacted Corey Richens' attorney, but did not receive a reply. Richens was taken into custody Monday and remains behind bars. Katie Beck, NBC News.
Now to a vacation turned deadly. 2 business students from NYU caught in the crossfire in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Law enforcement making 1 arrest and still looking for other suspects tonight. NBC's Maya Eaglin has the latest.
Yo, this got a gun and she's trying to shoot right now.
An alleged gunwoman
Whoa! At the scene where two NYU students' lives were cut short in Puerto Rico. Today, her head down, appearing in court after turning herself into police. Authorities telling NBC News Marigeli McLeod-Claudio is the woman in the video. She's now on $150,000 bail, charged with illegal possession of a firearm and shooting in a public place endangering safety, according to Telemundo. It all happened at the scene of the fatal shooting of Sergio Palomino Ruiz and Franco Medina Angulo, both MBA students at New York University's Stern School of Business. The two Peruvian nationals were on vacation in Puerto Rico, celebrating a birthday with classmates when tragedy struck. Whoa! Early Saturday morning in San Juan, police say the two men were caught in the crossfire of a shooting.
It seemed like they were kind-hearted people, and they were just, unfortunately, in the wrong place at the wrong time.
The search for additional suspects continues as police say there's evidence of more gunfire at the scene.
In this video, as you can see, a lady appears shooting with a gun. But we have more shell casings that are not consistent with the number of shots heard in the video. It is possible that the video doesn't tell the whole story.
Police telling NBC News they are interviewing two men as possible suspects. The students' untimely deaths come during a bloody year in Puerto Rico, with 167 homicides in 2023 so far, according to police.
This is a war zone. Here, no one is safe. Everyone is in danger. We urgently need a curfew for businesses to be established.
Classmates of the victims back in New York City shaken.
He asked really good questions during class, I will say, things that I didn't think of. So it's really sad to see a life being taken away like this, just knowing that he has such a bright future ahead.
Last year, Ruiz posted on LinkedIn how happy he was to start at Stern. And Angulo announced he won first place at the JP Morgan case competition last year, a prestigious award for aspiring bankers.
They seem like they were hard workers. Anybody who goes here is somebody who really puts the effort in.
There was a moment of silence in class this week. An NYU spokesperson saying, quote, the university has been in touch with the remaining group members to offer them support and aid. None of the others were injured.
I can't imagine what their family and parents are going through.
Maya Eaglin joins us now from New York. Maya, what horrible news for Ruiz and Angulo's classmates to receive. I mean, how is the school responding here?
So NYU will have counseling services available to students who were in the same program and any friends of the victims. The school said there will be a candlelight vigil for Angulo and Ruiz on Thursday. And NYU has also reached out to the families of the slain students to provide whatever assistance they can and express their sympathies of the university and the community. Jake.
Maya Eaglin reporting from New York. Maya, thank you. Coming up next, an urgent manhunt underway in Pennsylvania. Two inmates escaping from a Philadelphia jail, one of them an accused murderer. How authorities say they got out and the reward now being offered. That is next. Back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin with new details on that mass shooting at an outlet mall in Allen, Texas. Two U.S. officials confirming to NBC News that the suspect was expelled from the military in 2008 because of mental health issues, including an adjustment disorder. We are also learning he was able to legally obtain the firearms used in the shooting that killed 8 people, including an AR-15 and a handgun. A manhunt is underway after 2 inmates escaped from a Philadelphia jail. Police say 18-year-old Amin Hurst and 24-year-old Nasir Grant escaped Sunday by cutting a hole in a fence at a recreation yard. Hurst is currently being held on 4 murder charges, including a deadly shooting outside that jail. Grant is facing drug and gun charges. Philadelphia police and U.S. Marshals are offering a reward of up to $25,000 for information leading to each man's arrest. And Frito-Lay is issuing a voluntary recall of Lay's classic potato chips over allergy concerns. The FDA says that the affected products may contain an undeclared milk ingredient. They were sold in stores in Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. No allergic reactions have been reported, but those with an allergy or severe sensitivity to dairy are encouraged not to consume that product. Turning now to an important health update, a U.S. task force releasing new guidelines today for when women should start getting mammograms. The panel of experts lowering the age for the routine breast cancer screening from 50 years old to 40. And for more on this, I want to bring in Dr. Sarah Friedewald. She's the chief of breast imaging in the Department of Radiology at Northwestern Medicine. Dr. Friedewald, thank you so much for being here. So first, let me ask you to tell us a little more about these recommendations. Why are they so important? Why this change?
Well, historically, the United States Preventive Services Task Force recommended that women get screened every year beginning at age 50, and they just revised their guidelines to include women in their 40s. And this is important because 1 in 6 breast cancers occur in women in their 40s, and women who need to get screened are often in this age group. So we want to make sure that there's enough access for everybody.
And the panel also recognizes that black women are 40% more likely to die of breast cancer than white women are. How do racial disparities play a role in these new guidelines?
Well, this is very important because Black women definitely tend to have more aggressive cancers as well as triple negative cancers, and they tend to occur earlier in women. So we want to make sure that we're not just using data based on white women, which is historically the randomized controlled trials have focused on. And so we applaud the task force to include women in their 40s.
Now, I want to talk here for a second just about the sort of where we are at in the fight against breast cancer. My mom is a 2-time breast cancer survivor, and she is one of those 1 in 6 women who had it in her 40s. Early detection is why she's still with us. She's watching my kids as I do this broadcast. I mean, do you think these screening updates are enough, or where are we at in the trajectory? Does more need to be done here to save lives?
Certainly more needs to be done than these recommendations. The USPSTF is recommending every other year beginning at age 40. The American College of Radiology and the Society of Breast Imaging really want to emphasize that the most lives are saved if women are screened every year beginning at age 40. Additionally, these guidelines are for average risk women. We would like to emphasize that all women should be risk assessed beginning at age 25. That way, if patients are identified as being higher risk or greater than a 20% lifetime risk of developing breast cancer, that they should adhere to more aggressive screening strategies.
Dr. Sarah Friedewald, thank you so much for being with us. And for all of you out there, please get checked. Have your mom get checked. Have your wife get checked. Everybody get checked, please. And thank you so much for being with us. Coming up, the former Prime Minister of Pakistan arrested. The ousted leader facing multiple corruption charges. His supporters furious and taking to the streets. Those images when we come back. Back now with Top Stories Global Watch and the arrest of Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Video shows security agents dragging Khan into an armored vehicle outside of an Islamabad court where he was appearing on corruption charges. His arrest sparking protests and violent clashes with police across the country. Khan had been removed from office after a paramilitary vote of no confidence in April of last year. And an early heat wave intensifying a long drought in Spain. New drone footage showing reservoirs across the Catalonia region drying up after the whole country experienced some of the warmest temperatures on record for April. The drought also impacting farming and causing early season wildfires. When we come back, say goodbye to Fort Hood, the Army base which bore the name of a Confederate general officially getting a new title, the boundary-breaking 33-year veteran it will now honor. That is next. Finally tonight, a new legacy in Texas. The U.S. Army base once known as Fort Hood getting a new name, honoring the first Hispanic 4-star general. It's the first base to be named for a Latino service member.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It's known as the Great Place, a reference to the base's size and armored might. But tonight, this Texas military installation has a new name.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Fort Cavazos, Texas.
Fort Cavazos, named for Army General and Mexican-American Richard Cavazos.
General Cavazos was a proven combat leader who repeatedly demonstrated courage, selfless service, and an irrepressible warrior spirit.
Cavazos, who died in 2017, once served as commander here when it was named Fort Hood. During his 33-year Army career, he served in the Korean and Vietnam Wars, receiving 2 Distinguished Service Crosses. And rising all the way to 4-star general, the first Hispanic American to hold that rank.
I challenge all Hispanic in the service, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, and the Coast Guard, to be all that you can be.
People like General Cavazos helped make the Army what it is today.
This renaming ceremony in Texas, part of a larger mandate by Congress to remove Confederate names from military bases.
All of these installations have to reflect the values that we have as a country and those of the Army.
Fort Hood, built in 1942, was named after Confederate General John Bell Hood.
In many ways, what we do in this naming redesignation process is look for soldiers who reflect our values, who recognize and exemplify what we want to define the Army to look like.
Now, as the first base named to honor a Latino service member, the Army hopes the Great Place will inspire the next generation of soldiers.
Let his name and all that it represents inspire us all every single day to live up to his legacy.
Thank you for watching Top Story. For Tom Llamas, I'm Jake Ward in San Francisco. Please stay right there. More News Now is on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.